Okay, let's unpack this. There's this fundamental, incredibly human thing we do, right? We connect with each other, we share experiences, we try to make sense of the wild, messy, wonderful world around us.
It's sort of hardwired into us, isn't it?
Totally. And honestly, think about how much of our daily communication is just telling stories. You had a crazy morning commute. That's a story.
Mm-hmm.
Your pet did something hilarious. Story. You remember that awkward thing that happened years ago? Yep, another story. It's woven into the fabric of how we interact.
It truly is. Storytelling isn't confined to books or movies. It's happening constantly, in our conversations. It's the primary way we build rapport, express our personalities, share lessons learned, and yeah, very often entertain each other.
Exactly. But here's the thing. For many people who are learning English, this essential part of communication, this daily act of sharing, can feel like a huge mountain to climb. It's daunting. We've been looking at a stack of material for this deep dive, specifically about how to tell stories effectively in English. And the sources acknowledge this challenge head on. They point out that learners often struggle. Maybe they jump between different ideas without a clear thread, leaving the listener lost.
Yeah, that coherence piece is tricky.
Or they might mix up verb tenses, making the timeline confusing. That's a common one.
Oh, absolutely. Past, present, future.
Hmm.
Getting them aligned in a narrative takes practice.
And this is a big one the sources mention. They might include so many small, seemingly irrelevant details that the main point gets buried.
The detail overload.
Yeah, and the story ends up being confusing or even, well, a little boring.
That difficulty is incredibly common. You have this vivid experience or idea in your mind, something you really want to share, but translating that into a coherent, engaging narrative in a new language requires a specific set of skills.
It's more than just vocabulary, isn't it?
Oh, much more. It's about structuring information, choosing the right words, yes, but also managing tenses, pacing the delivery, knowing how to arrange everything for impact.
Right. So our mission for this deep dive, pulling directly from the insights in the source material you've shared with us, is to break down exactly how you can tell your stories in English more clearly, more naturally, and in a way that genuinely captivates your listener.
We want you to feel not just capable, but confident.
Confident and even excited the next time someone asks, "How was your weekend?" or "Tell me about that trip." Instead of dreading it, you actually look forward to sharing.
Exactly. So we're going to walk through the essential elements outlined in the material. First, we'll unpack the fundamental blueprint, the structure that makes a story easy to follow. That's key.
The backbone.
Then we'll dive into useful phrases, those little linguistic tools that make you sound more fluent and signal different parts of your story, like little signposts. After that, we'll explore how to add richness and depth using emotion and detail. But, and this is important, with a critical look at how to get the right amount. That balance thing.
Not too much, not too little.
Precisely. And finally, we'll touch on the really interesting cultural context of storytelling in English, which is, it's key to truly connecting with your audience on a more personal level.
By the end of this exploration, you should have a really solid, practical understanding that you can start putting into practice immediately. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Let's jump right into that first crucial point from the source. Story structure. It's the backbone of any good narrative.
Why does structure matter so much? I mean, couldn't I just list the events in the order they happened? I woke up, I ate breakfast, I went to the park, I saw a dog, I went home. Isn't that telling the story? Seems simple enough.
Well, it's telling something, sure. It's a chronological list of events.
Yeah.
But is it a story in the engaging sense we're talking about? Probably not.
What's missing then?
Think about it like building a house. You could just pile up all the materials, the bricks, the wood, the roof tiles in a heap on the ground.
Okay, got the pile.
Those are all the facts or events of your story. But to make a functional, habitable house, you need a blueprint, right? A framework.
Right, you need a plan. Otherwise, it's just a mess.
Exactly. Structure provides that blueprint for your story. It organizes those events in a way that creates meaning, allows for suspense or humor, builds towards a point, and ultimately makes it easy for the listener to follow, understand, and remember.
Okay. So it's about the listener's experience.
Very much so. Without structure, as the source rightly points out, your story can feel disorganized, kind of jumping between ideas, leaving your listener struggling to keep up or figure out, okay, what's the main point here?
Got it. So we need a blueprint. What's the simple, powerful structure the source suggests? I imagine it's not like some complex 5-act dramatic structure.
No, thankfully not. The material simplifies it beautifully into 3 parts: the beginning, the middle, and the end.
Beginning, middle, end. Classic. Simple.
It's deliberately simple because complex structures can be overwhelming, especially when you're learning a new language, or even just telling a quick anecdote. By breaking your story down into these three distinct phases, you make the task much more manageable.
How so?
Well, you can focus on what needs to go into each part, one step at a time. It gives you mental compartments. Okay, first I need to do the beginning stuff, then the middle bit, then wrap it up.
Right. The 3 acts. Let's explore each one in detail then. First, the beginning. What's the primary purpose of this part? What absolutely has to be in there?
The purpose of the beginning is fundamentally about setting the scene and providing context. This is non-negotiable, really.
Why non-negotiable?
Because if you start your story abruptly with the main event, like suddenly this guy gave us free cake, your listener will be totally confused. They'll be thinking, wait, who's us? Where are you? Why cake? What were you doing before?
Right. Too many questions, no grounding.
Exactly. Setting the scene grounds the listener, giving them the necessary background information so they can understand the rest of the story. It puts them in the picture with you.
And the source gives us specific questions to answer in this beginning part to make sure we provide that context. What are those crucial questions?
Yeah, this is super helpful. It suggests asking yourself and making sure you're beginning answers. First, who is in the story? The characters.
Okay.
Second, where is it happening? The location.
Where?
Third, when did it happen? The time.
When? Okay.
And fourth, what is happening initially, like the starting situation or the background activity before things got interesting.
Who, where, when, what initially. Okay, that makes sense. The source uses a very clear example sentence for the beginning. Last weekend, I was at a coffee shop with my friend and we were just chatting about work. Let's use this to illustrate how those 4 questions are answered. Break it down for us.
Absolutely. Let's break down that simple sentence. Who?
I was at a coffee shop with my friend, so me and my friend.
Right away, you know the 2 main people involved in this story. It's the storyteller and their friend. Clear. Okay, where?
I was at a coffee shop. Easy enough. Location established.
Yep. You're immediately placed in a specific location, a coffee shop. Your listener can probably already start picturing what that might look and sound like.
Okay.
When?
Last weekend. Sets the time frame. Not ancient history. Not happening right now.
Exactly. The listener knows this happened recently. It helps orient them in time. And finally,
Good.
what initially?
We were just chatting about work. So the normal background activity, nothing special yet.
Perfect. This tells you what the normal background activity was before the interesting thing happened. They weren't doing anything unusual, just a typical conversation. So look at that. 1 sentence.
Yeah, see, just that 1 sentence does all the heavy lifting for the beginning. It's efficient and effective. The listener knows exactly who, where, and when, and has a sense of the initial situation. They are oriented and ready for the story to unfold. No confusion.
It's incredibly powerful in its simplicity. And while the source focuses on those 4 explicit questions, the idea of setting the scene also naturally leads to thinking about adding just a touch of sensory detail here.
Oh, interesting. Like what? Even if it doesn't answer those specific questions.
Yeah, even if it's not strictly answering who, where, when, or what initially. It's about making the scene more vivid. For instance, in the coffee shop example, you might briefly mention the smell of freshly brewed coffee.
Ah, okay. Or the background noise.
Exactly. The gentle hum of conversation and the espresso machine. Or maybe the feeling of the warm mug in your hands.
I like that. It adds texture.
It does. These sensory details aren't strictly necessary to answer the 4 core questions, but they are vital for making the scene come alive. They start painting the picture for the listener, making the setting feel real and immediate.
So it's like adding a little bit of color to the sketch you've just drawn with the facts.
That's a great way to put it. This directly supports the later point about adding detail to make the story engaging, and you can start doing it right here in the beginning. You're not just giving facts. You're starting to create an atmosphere, drawing the listener in more deeply.
Okay, so the beginning establishes the foundation. Who, where, when, and the initial state of affairs may be enhanced with a touch of sensory detail to bring the scene to life. What's the next part? Where does the story go from there?
That takes us into the middle. If the beginning is setting the stage, the middle is where the main performance happens. This is, as the source describes it, where something interesting happens.
The interesting bit. The reason you're telling the story.
Exactly. It's the core event, the twist, the conflict, the surprise, the problem, whatever it is that disrupts the normal situation you established in the beginning.
So, going back to the coffee shop story, what was the something interesting in that example? What disrupted the normal chatting about work?
The source continues the story like this. Suddenly, the waiter walked over and gave us a free dessert. We were so surprised because we hadn't ordered it.
Okay, getting a free dessert out of nowhere while you're just chatting about work definitely qualifies as something interesting. It's a disruption. It breaks the pattern.
Absolutely. Receiving that unexpected dessert is the central event of the story.
Hmm.
And notice the inclusion of the word suddenly. The source highlights this word, and it's incredibly effective.
Why suddenly? What does that word do?
Suddenly is a signal word.
Mm.
It immediately tells the listener that a change is happening, often an unexpected or rapid one. It shifts the energy of the story and directs the listener's attention to this pivotal moment. It basically says, pay attention, the main action is happening now. It flags the beginning of the middle, in a way.
Okay, so it's like a little punctuation mark signaling the shift. And again, the reaction is part of it. We are so surprised.
Yes, and this links back to the later point about emotion, which we'll dive into more. By stating their surprise, the storyteller isn't just giving a dry account of receiving food. They're sharing their emotional reaction to the event.
Which makes it more relatable, right?
Definitely. This is crucial for making the story relatable. The listener can understand why this event is significant because it was surprising. This also shows how the middle needs to build on the beginning. The surprise of getting a free dessert is amplified because the initial context was just a normal chat about work.
Ah, good point. If they had been, like, celebrating a birthday loudly, a free dessert might be less surprising.
Exactly. The contrast between the ordinary beginning, just chatting about work,
Yeah.
and the unexpected middle, suddenly free dessert, is where the narrative power comes from. The middle is where the tension or surprise or humor, depending on the story's nature, really unfolds, driven by the context set initially.
So the middle delivers the punchline, or the twist, or the main event, and often includes a reaction or a feeling about it.
Precisely. It's the core content, the reason the story is worth telling.
Okay, so we've set the scene in the beginning, introduced the main event or surprise in the middle. Now we need to wrap it all up. The end. What does the end part do?
The end provides the resolution. It answers the questions raised by the middle. What was the outcome of the main event? How did everything conclude? This is the crucial part that gives the listener a sense of closure.
Closure is important. You don't want the listener wondering, so, what happened then?
Exactly. It prevents the story from feeling unfinished or just stopping abruptly, trailing off awkwardly.
How does the coffee shop story finish according to the source? How does it resolve the mystery of the free dessert?
The source wraps it up like this. It turned out that the dessert was for another table, but the waiter told us to keep it. It was such a nice surprise.
Ah, okay. That's a perfect resolution. It answers the question of why they got the dessert. It was a mistake.
Uh-huh. Explains the surprise.
And tells you what happened next. They got to keep it anyway. The final outcome.
Exactly. The ending clarifies the mystery and confirms the final result. And again, notice how it ends on a feeling.
Yeah.
It was such a nice surprise.
Yeah, that phrase brings it back to the emotional impact.
Right. Including a phrase like, it was such a nice surprise, is a great way to conclude. It provides a final emotional note, reinforcing the overall positive feeling of the experience. A clear ending makes the story feel complete and satisfying for the listener. It leaves them with a final thought or feeling, linking back to that idea we'll discuss later about stories in English-speaking cultures often being about entertainment and connection, not just facts.
So the core principle the source emphasizes is this simple structure. Beginning, set the scene. Who, where, when, what initially. Middle, introduce the interesting thing, the disruption, the core event. End, wrap it up, resolve it, state the final outcome, and maybe feeling.
That's the essence of it.
And keeping it simple like this makes it clear and avoids the pitfalls of confusion or rambling.
Precisely. For learners, having this clear three-part framework is invaluable. It provides a mental checklist and a roadmap. You focus on providing the necessary information in the beginning, building towards that middle point, and then bringing it to a clear close.
It takes the pressure off trying to figure out some complicated plot.
It really does.
Yeah.
This simplicity is its strength. It makes the daunting task of telling a story feel achievable and logical, directly combating that issue of jumping between ideas or getting lost. It's a universal pattern that works for almost any brief personal anecdote, the kind you tell every day.
That framework makes so much sense. It's the skeleton, the basic structure. But a skeleton needs, well, flesh and clothing to really come alive.
Good analogy. Yes.
Just having the structure isn't always enough to make your story sound natural and engaging, like something a native speaker would tell you over coffee.
You're absolutely right. And that brings us perfectly to the next important point from the source. using specific language tools, those handy storytelling phrases.
Ah, the magic words.
Kind of. These aren't just decorative. They act as verbal cues, like signposts for your listener. They help them navigate your narrative. They add a natural rhythm and flow to your speech. They signal shifts in the story, build anticipation, and provide closure. They make it sound more, well, like a story.
Okay, let's start at the beginning again with these phrases. How do they help you signal that you're about to launch into a story and get your listener's attention? You can't just drop into it sometimes.
Right, you need a little transition. The source offers some excellent phrases specifically for starting a story. Their primary function is to transition from general conversation into storytelling mode, and crucially, to immediately pique the listener's interest. They're designed to make someone stop and listen.
Like a little hook. Give me some examples from the source. What do these sound like?
Okay, you'll hear native speakers use these frequently.
You won't believe what happened to me,
Ooh, I like that one. Makes you curious immediately.
doesn't it? Another one, maybe more common for quick, exciting news. Guess what?
Simple, direct, interactive.
Exactly. And a third one, setting a specific tone. So the funniest thing happened the other day.
Okay, so those are three good options. Why are they so effective at grabbing attention? What's the psychology there?
Well, they create anticipation immediately. You won't believe what happened to me is the direct promise that the following story is surprising, unusual, or maybe even a little unbelievable. It sets a high bar for the listener's expectations, making them want to know if it lives up to the hype. Guess what? Is interactive, like you said. It directly engages the listener and creates a tiny moment of light suspense before you reveal the exciting news or event. It prompts them to participate mentally, even if they don't actually guess.
Makes them lean in a bit.
Right. And so the funniest thing happened the other day sets the tone up front. The listener knows they're about to hear something intended to be humorous. They adjust their listening mode accordingly, ready for a laugh. So these phrases act as an explicit verbal signal. Okay, conversation pause, pay attention, a story is about to begin. They're not just placeholders, they're active tools for engaging your audience from the first word.
Let's think about using them. If you, say, finally got that promotion you were hoping for after months of waiting, how might you use one of these to tell a friend excitedly?
Oh, you could definitely burst out with, guess what? I got the promotion. It's much more dynamic and exciting than just flatly stating I got the promotion. The phrase adds that spark.
Okay. What about if you had a really bizarre encounter on the way to work?
Then you might use, you won't believe what happened to me on the bus this morning. That phrase immediately signals that something strange and noteworthy occurred, making your friend lean in to hear more. It promises an unusual tale.
And the funny one, maybe a kitchen disaster.
Perfect. You could start with, so the funniest thing happened the other day. I tried to make bread for the first time, and let's just say the dough had other plans. It ended up, like, everywhere. See? Using so the funniest thing primes your listener for humor, making the story land better. These phrases aren't just words. They carry intention and energy.
Okay, those are great for starting, kicking things off. What about in the middle of the story, when you reach that interesting part, the core event? How do you use phrases to build suspense or highlight a key turning point? You mentioned suddenly earlier. Are there others?
Yes, absolutely. The source provides specific phrases designed precisely for this moment to signal a change in pace, an unexpected event, or a moment of increased tension or drama. These are the phrases that guide the listener through the unfolding action and emphasize the most exciting or surprising parts. They punctuate the narrative flow during that crucial middle section.
Which phrases are good for the middle? What did the source list?
Okay, the source lists several useful ones. We already mentioned suddenly. Others include all of a sudden, very similar to suddenly.
Okay, all of a sudden.
Out of nowhere, emphasizing unexpectedness.
Out of nowhere. I like that one.
And then seems simple, but very important for sequence.
Right, the basic connector.
And to my surprise, highlighting your reaction.
Okay, so how do these work together, or separately, to enhance the middle of a story? Let's imagine a mini story.
Maybe.
You're walking home late at night.
Okay, good scenario. So you've set the scene. I was walking home late last night. It was really quiet, just thinking about what I'd watch on TV. That's the beginning. Now the middle.
Yeah. How do you introduce the interesting bit?
You could say, and all of a sudden, I heard this strange scratching noise behind me. See? All of a sudden flags the change, the unexpected event.
Okay, scratchy noise. Spooky.
Then you could add, it seemed to come out of nowhere. This phrasing really enhances the sense of mystery and surprise where did this sound come from?
Right, it builds that tension. And then,
Yeah.
how does that fit in?
And then is fundamental for moving the action forward step by step. So after hearing the noise, A. And then I stopped. I turned around slowly. It links actions together clearly and keeps the listener following the sequence. While basic, its frequent use in storytelling provides a natural rhythmic flow. It can also build tension if used repeatedly to list escalating events like, and then the scratching got louder, and then I saw a shadow move.
Okay, I'm hooked. What about to my surprise?
This phrase is brilliant because it directly injects your personal reaction into the narrative at the moment the event occurs. Instead of waiting until the end to say you were surprised, you say it as the surprising thing happens.
Ah, simultaneous action and reaction.
Exactly. So continuing the story, I turned around slowly. And then, to my surprise, a tiny, fluffy kitten ran out from under a parked car.
Oh, not so spooky after all.
Right. But see how "and then" continues the sequence and, to my surprise, conveys your feeling about seeing the kitten right at that moment. It's much more immediate and impactful than just stating, then I saw a kitten, I was surprised. It helps the listener share that feeling of astonishment, or in this case, maybe relief and surprise, with you in real time.
So these phrases in the middle act as crucial signposts for key actions, unexpected turns, and emotional responses, keeping the listener engaged in the unfolding events. They manage the pace.
Exactly. They add rhythm, they highlight important moments, and they make the progression of the story feel natural and easy to follow, just like a native speaker would do instinctively, often without even thinking about it.
Okay, great tools for the middle. Finally, we need to wrap things up cleanly. What phrases help signal the end of a story and provide that sense of closure we talked about?
Just as you need to signal the start and the key turns, a clear ending is really important. It tells the listener definitively that the narrative has concluded and provides that sense of finality. It brings the story to a satisfying close, avoiding that awkward fade out.
Nobody likes an awkward fade out. What are some phrases the source suggests for ending a story?
The source gives some common and effective ones. For example, in the end, very common, straightforward.
In the end. Okay.
And that's how it all happened. A bit more definitive, perhaps.
And that's how it all happened. Feels very final.
It does. And then there are phrases that summarize the feeling like, it was such a crazy, funny, strange, and etc. experience.
Ah, the summary judgment phrase.
Exactly. How do these work to provide closure? Well, in the end is a very common and straightforward way to introduce the final outcome or the resolution of the situation. Going back to our coffee shop example, in the end, we got a free dessert. It clearly signals the conclusion of the dessert mini-drama.
Simple and effective. What about "and that's how it all happened"?
And that's how it all happened is more definitive, like you said. It states explicitly that you have reached the end of the narrative arc. It leaves absolutely no doubt that the story is over. For our late-night kitten story, you might finish with finding its owner or deciding to keep it, and then say, and that's how it all happened. I ended up adopting the little guy. It ties everything up with a bow.
Okay, and using phrases like, it was such a crazy experience, how does that function as an ending?
This is a great way to summarize the overall feeling or impact of the story you've just told. It encapsulates the main takeaway emotion or impression you want to leave with the listener. It often comes right at the very end, sometimes after another concluding phrase.
So you could combine them.
Yes, definitely. Like, in the end, we got to keep the dessert. It was such a nice surprise. Or, and that's how it all happened. I ended up with a kitten. It was such a crazy experience. This type of phrase provides a final emotional punctuation mark and reinforces the story's genre or tone. Was it funny, strange, exciting, scary? It gives the listener a neat summary feeling.
So by consciously using these phrases for starting, building the middle, and ending, you make your story not only structurally sound with the beginning, middle, end framework, but you also give it that natural flow and signaling system that native speakers use. It makes it much more engaging and easier to follow.
Exactly. They bridge the gap between just recounting facts chronologically and actually performing a narrative. They add fluency and a natural cadence that holds the listener's attention and makes you sound more comfortable and natural in English.
Okay, we've covered the framework, beginning, middle, end, and the verbal signposts, those storytelling phrases. But the source goes further, talking about making your story truly interesting, not just clear and structurally correct.
Right, because clarity is essential, but interest is what makes people want to listen.
Exactly. This is where adding color and depth comes in with emotion and detail. And the source stresses there's a crucial balance here. It's not just more is better.
This is where your personality as a storyteller really comes into play. It's about moving beyond a dry recitation of facts, I went here, I did this happened, to making your listener feel something and see what you saw.
Bringing them into the experience.
Precisely. The source emphasizes that adding emotion and detail makes stories vivid and interesting, but it also rightly includes a very important caution about not overdoing it with either one. Finding that sweet spot is key.
Let's talk about the power of detail first. Why is adding detail so important, according to the source? What does it achieve?
Details are what paint the picture in the listener's mind. They make the story tangible and specific. Without details, everything remains abstract, vague, and hard to connect with emotionally or visually.
Like the difference between a black and white sketch and a full-color painting.
Exactly. When you include details, you help listeners see, hear, feel, smell, and maybe even taste what you experienced. It allows them to step into the world of your story with you, making it much more immersive.
The source uses a very simple, powerful comparison to illustrate this. I saw a dog versus I saw the cutest golden retriever running around the park. Let's really unpack that. What makes the second sentence so much better?
Oh, the difference is night and day, isn't it? I saw a dog is a bare, uninteresting fact. It creates a minimal, generic image, could be any dog doing anything. But look at what the details add in the second sentence. First, cutest.
Okay, that's subjective. That's an opinion.
Right, and that's important. It isn't just a description of the dog, it's an expression of the storyteller's emotional reaction and opinion about the dog. It tells you how they felt seeing it. It adds a layer of personality and feeling right away.
Okay, so cutest adds emotion. What else?
Golden Retriever. Instead of the generic dog, this gives a specific breed. Immediately, most people have a mental image of a golden retriever, friendly, probably happy, medium-sized, with that characteristic golden fur. It's much more concrete and specific.
Yeah, I can picture that easily.
And finally, running around the park. This provides specific action and location within the setting. The dog isn't just passively present, it's actively moving, full of energy, running around, and doing so in a familiar environment, the park. It adds dynamism and context.
So those specific details, the subjective opinion, cutest, the concrete noun, golden retriever, and the descriptive action location, running around the park, take a bland statement and truly make the story come alive, as the source puts it. It creates a mini scene.
Exactly. They turn a statistic, a dog was seen, into a memorable image, a delightful golden retriever puppy bounding happily in a grassy field. And you can apply this principle everywhere. Think about other types of details you could add to various stories.
Like what? Give me some more examples.
Okay, visual details. Instead of a red car, maybe a cherry red vintage Mustang. Instead of an old building, a crumbling stone castle with ivy crawling up the walls.
Much more evocative.
Auditory details. Instead of I heard a noise, maybe I heard the faint hall of a floorboard upstairs, or the sudden blare of a car horn right behind me.
Create suspense or surprise.
Other sensory details. The sticky feel of spilled soda on the counter, the unexpected warmth of the sun breaking through the clouds, the overpowering smell of garlic from the kitchen next door.
Engages more senses.
Specific nouns adjectives. A rickety wooden chair instead of an old chair. A tiny shivering sparrow instead of a small bird.
Specificity helps visualization.
Specific actions verbs. Instead of he looked angry, maybe he clenched his fists and his jaw tightened. Instead of she walked away, maybe she stormed out of the room or she hesitantly shuffled towards the door.
Shows how they did it, adds character.
Precisely. Including these specific sensory or descriptive details helps the listener build a richer, more immersive mental world for your story and makes it feel real.
That makes total sense. Details add richness and life. But you mentioned a crucial caution from the source. But be careful, not too many details. Why is it bad to include too many details? My instinct might be that more information is always better, more realistic.
That's a very common instinct, especially if you're focused on accuracy. But in storytelling, particularly casual storytelling, it can actually be detrimental. The goal is vividness and clarity that serves the story, not an exhaustive courtroom-style report.
So what happens if you put in too much?
Too many details, particularly those that aren't relevant to the main point or don't add significant color or atmosphere, can really overwhelm the listener. They might get lost trying to process all the unnecessary information, lose track of the main plot line, and honestly, the story can become slow, boring, or confusing.
Can you give an example of too much detail?
Imagine telling the coffee shop story, but first describing the exact pattern on the wallpaper, the brand of sugar packets on the table, the color of the barista's apron, the titles of 3 magazines on the rack. Unless one of those things is directly related to why you got the free dessert, like maybe the barista recognized you from a magazine, they just clutter the narrative. They slow it down and dilute the impact of the actual interesting event.
Right, it becomes a list instead of a story.
Mm-hmm.
The listener starts thinking, okay, why are they telling me all this? Get to the point.
Exactly. So it's about finding the balance. The source says, keep it simple but expressive. How do you know where that line is? How much is enough?
Yeah, that's the tricky part.
The line is usually drawn based on relevance and impact. Ask yourself, does this detail help the listener understand the situation better? Does it make the scene more vivid in a way that matters? Does it contribute to the atmosphere or the emotion of the moment? Does it help explain why the interesting thing happened or how someone reacted?
So does it serve a purpose in the story?
Yes. If a detail doesn't serve the story in some way, if it's just random extra information that doesn't enhance the listener's understanding or engagement with the core narrative, it's probably a detail to omit or at least simplify. The key is curation. You select enough detail to make it live and breathe for the listener, but not so much that it drowns them in information and distracts from the core beginning, middle, end structure.
Selectivity is key. Choose the details that give the most bang for their buck, so to speak.
That's a good way to put it. Choose impactful details.
Okay, so details help the listener see and feel the world of the story physically. What about the inner world? The source also highlights the power of emotion. How does that work?
Emotion is arguably the most powerful tool for connection in storytelling. Stories are ultimately about human experiences, and humans are emotional beings. Sharing your emotions during the story allows the listener to connect not just with the events, but with how you felt your surprise, your fear, your joy, your frustration, your relief.
It bridges the gap between storyteller and listener.
It really does. When you share your feelings authentically, the listener can empathize with you, understand the impact of the event on you personally, and feel more connected to you as a person. It makes a story resonate on a deeper, more memorable level. It's often the emotion that stays with the listener long after the facts have faded.
The source gives a great example comparing, I was surprised, to I was shocked, I couldn't believe it. How does that show the power of using stronger, more descriptive emotion?
Well, I was surprised is functional, but it's very mild, very generic. It tells the listener that you experienced surprise, but it doesn't convey the intensity or the nature of that surprise. Was it mild surprise? Big surprise? Pleasant surprise? Unpleasant surprise?
Good land.
Exactly. But I was shocked uses a much stronger, more specific emotion word. Shocked implies a higher degree of surprise, often accompanied by disbelief or even a momentary sense of paralysis. It's a bigger reaction.
Okay, so shocked dials up the intensity. What about adding, I couldn't believe it?
Adding, I couldn't believe it, further amplifies that feeling of astonishment and disbelief.
Yep.
It shows the depth of your reaction, explaining why you were shocked. It gives insight into your mental state at that moment. The combination paints a much clearer and more intense picture of your internal experience.
So instead of just stating a basic emotion, you're conveying the full force and maybe even the quality of it.
Precisely. You're inviting the listener to feel what you felt, not just know that you felt something. And you can do this with all sorts of emotions. Think about happiness. Instead of a simple, I was happy, you could say, I was absolutely thrilled, or I was over the moon, or I felt like I could jump for joy.
Much more expressive. What about sadness?
Instead of, I was sad, maybe I was heartbroken, or I felt devastated, or my heart just sank when I heard the news.
Or anger.
Instead of, I was angry, maybe I was furious, or I was seething, or my blood was boiling. Using these stronger, more specific emotion words, or using phrases that describe the physical or mental experience of the emotion, like heart sank, blood boiling, felt like I could fly, paints a much clearer, more impactful picture of your internal state.
It allows the listener to empathize more deeply and share in the feeling, making the story far more memorable and moving.
That's the goal, emotional connection.
And like details, there's a caution with emotion too in the source material. But don't overdo it. What's the risk of adding too much emotion, or maybe the wrong kind?
Just as too many details clutter, too much or overly dramatic emotion can feel insincere or overwhelming to the listener. It can break the connection instead of building it.
How so?
Well, if you use highly intense emotional language for very minor events like, I was utterly enraged, shaking with fury because your toast was slightly burnt, The listener might feel disconnected. They might think you're being overly dramatic, exaggerating inappropriately, or maybe just not being genuine.
Right, it doesn't match the situation. It feels false.
Exactly. The emotion needs to feel authentic and generally proportional to the event in the story, unless, again, the exaggeration is the point, for comedic effect. Sincerity is paramount. When your expressed emotion feels real and earned by the events of the story, it connects powerfully. When it feels forced, melodramatic, or constant without variation, it can push the listener away or make them uncomfortable.
So it's about adding genuine emotional color where it fits naturally within the narrative arc, allowing the listener to relate, not performing over-the-top melodrama that feels put on.
Precisely. Authenticity and appropriate intensity are key.
So adding detail and emotion is key to making your story interesting and connecting with the listener. But it's a careful balance using vivid, relevant details that matter and expressing sincere emotion that fits the story and enhances the listener's understanding and empathy.
Exactly. It's about curating the experience for the listener, guiding what they see and feel to enhance their engagement with your narrative without overwhelming them.
This is really helpful. We've explored the structure, the essential phrases, and how to add depth with detail and emotion. The source then brings up a really fascinating point that sort of brings all of this together. The cultural context of storytelling, especially in English-speaking countries like the US and UK.
Yeah.
How does culture play into all this?
This is a crucial layer of understanding because communication doesn't happen in a vacuum. It explains why some of these techniques, like using certain phrases, focusing on engagement, are so effective and valued in English.
What does the source say about the role of storytelling culturally?
The source correctly points out that in many English-speaking cultures, storytelling is a big part of daily conversation. It's not something reserved for formal speeches or bedtime stories for kids or professional comedians. People tell stories constantly about their day at work, a funny interaction at the grocery store, a past travel experience, something they saw on the news. It's a primary vehicle for casual social interaction and relationship building.
So it's just normal chat,
Well,
basically.
it's a huge part of normal chat, yes. And it makes a very specific, insightful point, particularly about American and British culture, perhaps.
Yeah.
Storytelling isn't just about accurately reporting facts, the source says. It's about entertainment.
Entertainment, that's interesting. What does that mean exactly? It's not always about being funny, is it?
No, not necessarily funny, but engaging. This is a key cultural emphasis that language learners sometimes miss. While accuracy is, of course, appreciated, especially in formal or informational contexts in casual conversation, the primary goal is often to engage the listener, amuse them, surprise them, make them feel suspense, or connect with them on an emotional level.
So the experience of hearing the story is important.
Yes, the performance, the shared experience of the narrative is often as important, sometimes even more important, than perfect chronological or factual precision. Within reason, of course, you're not trying to deceive, but the emphasis is different. It's about making the listener feel something, not just know what happened.
So what does this emphasis on entertainment mean in practice for how stories are told? How does it influence the techniques people use?
It means that the techniques we've been discussing, using those engaging opening phrases, building suspense in the middle, adding sincere emotion, selecting vivid details, are all highly valued because they directly serve this goal of entertainment or engagement.
Connects everything.
Exactly. The structure provides clarity so the listener isn't confused. The phrases guide the flow and signal important moments. Emotion and detail make it engaging, funny, moving, or suspenseful. All of this is often in service of creating an enjoyable, interesting experience for the listener, fostering that connection.
The source gives a specific technique that flows directly from this emphasis on entertainment. Exaggeration. Tell me more about that.
Yes, it notes that, for example, if something funny happened at work, an American might exaggerate a little to make it sound funnier. This isn't about being untruthful in a malicious way. It's a form of playful hyperbole. It's a cultural convention often used in casual, humorous storytelling.
So stretching the truth for laughs.
Kind of. The point is to amplify the comedic effect of a situation, to make the listener laugh harder or appreciate the absurdity more. The listener usually understands it's an embellishment for humor, not a literal factual statement. It's part of the performance.
Can you give another quick example of that kind of playful exaggeration? Something common.
Sure. Imagine you were waiting a long time for a bus. Instead of saying, I waited for the bus for about 20 minutes, which is factual but dry, you might exaggerate for effect. I waited for that bus for ages. I thought I was going to grow old and die at that bus stop.
Okay. Clearly not literal, but it gets the feeling across strongly.
Exactly. No one believes you literally thought you would die there, but the exaggeration vividly conveys the intensity of your boredom or frustration in a humorous way. Or if your bag was heavy, this bag weighs a ton. It doesn't actually weigh a ton, but the hyperbole emphasizes how heavy it felt to you. This kind of exaggeration serves the entertainment purpose by adding humor and intensity, making the story more engaging.
That makes perfect sense. It's using language to heighten the effect for listener, especially for humor or strong feelings. But like you hinted earlier, you probably wouldn't exaggerate when giving serious information.
Absolutely not. That's the key distinction. This kind of exaggeration is typically reserved for casual, informal stories, usually with a humorous or emotionally expressive intent. If you're explaining something factual, giving instructions, reporting serious news, or in a professional context, then accuracy becomes much more important. You stick to the facts. Context is everything.
Got it. So use exaggeration wisely, mainly for fun, in casual chat. The source also mentions nonverbal cues as part of this cultural aspect of storytelling performance.
Absolutely. This is a huge part of it, often unconscious for native speakers. The source points out that in casual conversations, people often use gestures and voice changes extensively. This is another layer of the performance of storytelling that adds to the entertainment and engagement.
What kind of nonverbal things are we talking about?
Using your hands, for instance. Using them to describe size or shape, the fish was this big, gestures widely, or direction, you went that way, or action, miming, running, or throwing. Also, facial expressions, widening your eyes to show surprise, frowning to show concern, smiling or laughing along with the funny part.
Body language, too.
Yes, leaning in conspiratorially to share a secret or build suspense, leaning back in relaxation, maybe shifting your weight or posture to reflect a change in the story's mood, and crucially, using your voice, changing the pitch, higher for excitement, lower for seriousness, the volume, louder for emphasis, quieter for suspense, the speed, faster for urgency, slower for dramatic effect.
So it's a whole body and voice performance, not just words. How do these nonverbal cues make the story more fun or engaging, as the source suggests?
They add a vital visual and auditory dimension that supplements and often amplifies the verbal narrative. Whispering, for example, creates a sense of intimacy or suspense. And then I leaned in close, mimics whispering, and she told me the real reason.
Draws you right in.
Raising your voice or speaking faster can convey excitement or panic. And then I looked up, and faster, higher pitch, the ball was coming right at my head. Using gestures helps the listener visualize what you're describing much more easily than words alone sometimes. They add energy, emphasis, and personality. As the source says, even just using your hands makes the story more engaging. It's part of performing the narrative and sharing the experience with your whole body, not just your mouth. It shows you're invested in the telling.
So understanding this cultural emphasis on entertainment and engagement helps explain why native speakers instinctively use all these techniques: the clear structure, the signaling phrases, the vivid detail, the authentic emotion, sometimes playful exaggeration, and all the nonverbal cues. It's all about making the story clear and creating an enjoyable, connective experience for the listener.
Exactly. It shifts the perspective from just transmitting information, here are the facts of what happened, to actively connecting with your listener on a human level, sharing not just the facts, but the experience, the feeling, the humor, the surprise. Mastering this cultural aspect, or at least being aware of it, allows you as a learner to participate more fully and authentically in casual conversations in English, building deeper connections beyond just factual exchange.
This has been a truly insightful exploration into telling stories in English. It feels like we've really covered a lot of ground.
We have. Let's maybe recap the key takeaways.
Good idea. So we started with the essential yet simple three-part structure. The beginning: who, where, when, what initially. The middle: the interesting event, the disruption, and the end, the resolution, the outcome, as the fundamental blueprint for clarity.
The absolute foundation. Get that right, and you're halfway there.
Then we dove into those useful storytelling phrases, the signposts, words and short phrases that guide the listener and add a natural flow. Things like, guess what? To start, all of a sudden, or and then for the middle, and in the end, or it was such a defeat, to wrap it up.
Little tools that make a big difference in sounding natural and keeping the listener on track.
Then we explore the power of adding color and depth, using vivid, relevant detail to paint a picture. The cutest golden retriever running, and expressing sincere, appropriate emotion, I was shocked, to help the listener connect with your experience.
But always remembering that crucial balance, not too much detail that it becomes boring, And not too much emotion that it feels insincere. Curation is key.
Right, that balance. And finally, we discussed the fascinating cultural context, understanding that storytelling in English, especially casual storytelling, is often as much about entertainment and connection as it is about recounting facts.
And how techniques like playful exaggeration for humor and using nonverbal cues like gestures and voice changes all play into that goal of engaging the listener and sharing the experience.
Putting all these elements together, structure, phrases, detail, emotion, and cultural awareness, provides a really comprehensive toolkit, doesn't it?
It really does. It moves you beyond simply translating events from your first language into English to actually crafting narratives in English that are clear, engaging, natural sounding, and enjoyable for your listener. Consciously practicing these points will absolutely make you feel more confident and capable when it comes time to share your own experiences, big or small.
Which leads perfectly into the challenge presented in the source material. It gives you, the listener, 3 clear, actionable steps to start applying what we've discussed today, right now.
Exactly. Step 1. Think of a short story from your own life. Keep it simple to start. Don't try to recount your entire life history. Maybe something funny that happened yesterday, a surprising interaction you had last week, or just an interesting observation from your commute this morning. Anything works.
Okay, pick a simple story. Step 2.
Step 2. Tell that story mentally or even out loud to yourself using the 3-part structure we learned. Clearly identify what belongs in your beginning, who, where, when, what initially, your middle, the main event or surprise, and your end, the resolution. Practice moving smoothly through these parts in your mind or speech. Just map it out.
Structure it first. Got it. And step 3.
Step 3. As you tell your story, even just practicing, make a conscious effort to use at least 2 of the storytelling expressions we talked about. Maybe pick one phrase to start your story you won't believe, and one phrase to signal the main event. And then, to my surprise, or maybe one for the middle, out of nowhere, and one for the end, in the end. Just try incorporating a whole.
Practice using the tools. And the source encourages you to actually share that short story in English, doesn't it? Not just keep it in your head.
Yes, that's the crucial final piece. Find a language exchange partner. Tell it to a teacher, tell it to a friend who speaks English, or even just record yourself speaking on your phone. The act of producing the language, actually trying out the structure and phrases in real time or recorded time, is the most effective way to solidify this learning and build confidence.
Makes sense. You have to actually do it.
Absolutely. This hands-on practice helps you internalize the flow and the language naturally. And remember, don't aim for perfection on the first try, or even the 10th try. Focus on applying the principles, get the basic structure down, try using a couple of phrases, add maybe one key detail or an emotional word, and focus on the goal of connecting with your listener, even if that listener is just yourself in a recording to start with.
That's great practical advice. As we bring this deep dive to a close, let's reflect for a moment on that cultural point we discussed about connection and entertainment being key goals in English storytelling. Since sharing stories is such a fundamental way we build rapport, express our personalities, show vulnerability, and connect on a deeper level in English-speaking cultures. Consider this question. If learning to tell stories effectively in a new language gives you the tools to share your unique experiences, your humor, your surprise, your perspective, what does that allow you to share about yourself? That simple, factual communication, just exchanging information, simply can't capture.
Wow, that's a deep question.
Uh,
I think it allows you to share your humanness, doesn't it? Your individuality, the subjective lens through which you experience the world. Your personality shines through in the stories you choose to tell and how you tell them. It opens up a whole new level of connection beyond just functional language use.
yeah, it lets people see you, not just understand your words. That's a powerful thought to carry with you as you practice.
It really is. It reframes language learning from just acquiring grammar and vocabulary to acquiring the ability to truly express yourself and connect with others.
Definitely. And just a little heads up for our next deep dive. The source material also touched on related areas, and next time we'll be delving into another one that feels like a perfect follow-up to today's topic.
Oh, what's that?
We'll be looking at specific techniques for how to learn more effectively from native speakers, how to observe them, pick up natural language, and generally sound more natural yourself when you speak English.
Ah, that sounds incredibly useful too. Continuing the journey towards more natural, confident English communication, it all ties together.
Absolutely. Until then.
Keep talking, keep practicing, find those stories in your day, big or small, try telling them, and most importantly, enjoy the process of learning English.
Bye for now.
Take care.